Christian, it's so good to see you.
Thank you. I'm happy to be back.
Yes, I could feel the chemistry in the air, isn't it, when people are gathering together again?
That's absolutely correct. I came a week ago to Hong Kong and then Shenzhen, Shanghai and Beijing. And it was such a pleasure to be back, and I could see the activity coming back in the airport and the streets. So it felt so refreshing. At the end, we're all human beings, and the personal rapport is really important.
Absolutely. Do you have a glimpse of the city or of the scenes that are still in your mind right now as we speak?
I guess the traffic is back as it was at the time. So this means probably activity is back to normal.
But we have multiple layers of challenges, from climate change to pandemic to geopolitics, and the list could go on. So what does that mean to your business, reinsurance?
So taking risk, calculating risk, modeling risk is part of our core capabilities. So when it comes to climate change, for example, we have a lot of scientists who had to adapt the models as we saw the impact of climate change. And therefore we can price the risk and take the risk. And so the consequence is that the prices in reinsurance are going up. Yeah. But this is something we can manage. On the pandemic, we knew pandemic happened. We had priced it in. We had the models for pandemic, and the pandemic we had was actually not that different from what we had thought and modeled. So this is also a risk we can take. Other risks, like geopolitical risk, of course, are not insurable. And of course, there's a lot of those risks currently, probably also as a consequence of the pandemic, because people stopped talking to each other, and this has increased the risk significantly. And that's the ones I worry the most, because we cannot model them, we cannot price them, and we cannot take them.
When you are saying there's no model, or risk model for geopolitics, what exactly do you mean? How do you now trying to cultivate maybe a model, or trying to work out what would they exactly mean on a smaller scale and a bigger scale?
Yes, so for us, it is really important. We're a global company from the beginning. From 160 years ago, we were starting to go everywhere in the world because this is our model. This is the most efficient model, is to take premiums from everywhere and pay it out to the people who need it in every particular year. So we're inherently a very global company, and every hurdle that is created is a problem for our business model to function effectively. And when I talk about geopolitical risk, we came through a period of high globalization where everything was very open, and we have entered now a phase, probably also because of COVID, where people were alone and only talking to each other and not talking to the other parts of the world, where you can see that societies have drifted apart a bit. Everyone is in their own corner. And so for us, it is extremely important that now, as things normalize, there's again a lot of dialogue and connections like the CDF, where we can understand each other's position again and probably come back closer together.
Russian-Ukraine conflict, if I could use it as an example, has impacted the business community in an extreme way. So how has that influenced your business?
Yes, before I go to the economic part, I have to touch the human part. Europe has been shocked to have back a war on our doorsteps. We have millions of refugees, women and children coming from the Ukraine. Their cities get bombed and destroyed, and it's absolute horror. So for us, this is a very emotional issue, a very deep problem. It's not an economic problem, it's a human problem foremost. Now, on the economic side, we don't insure war, so we have relatively little direct losses. But of course, it influences the economy, the asset valuations, and we're a big investor. Every insurance and reinsurance company is a big investor. And so it influences us a lot on the investment side, mostly. And what you can see now, the inflationary tendencies, of course, impact our balance sheets.
How do you see the risks of the financial sector?
Yeah, so maybe first I have to say that insurance, reinsurance is quite different to banking as a business model. There's always the capital question. Do you have enough capital and do you have enough liquidity? And insurance, reinsurance always has enough liquidity, and capital, of course, they have to have enough. So there's no run on the bank in the insurance sector. So I think the insurance sector is not that affected, only indirectly through the asset valuations that you see. On the banking sector, I'm not sure it's a capital issue. It can be a liquidity issue when there's a lack of trust. When you see people take away their accounts. And this is very tricky because it's hard to predict where will the trust go away the first. Even if they have enough capital, they can get into a liquidity problem. And this is where you then need the intervention of central banks. So it could spread further. My hope is that regulators, states have learned a lot through the financial crisis. There's still a lot of learnings that are fresh in people's minds, and there's a lot of understanding and learnings from the great financial crisis. And therefore, I'm seeing at this stage a great willingness to intervene in the appropriate way very quickly to solve the issues.
So how do you see the balance of interest at time when we are facing with all kinds of crises?
Yeah, I think as a CEO today, you have to balance multiple interests. There's many inputs, and you also have to keep an overview of everything that's happening in the world. You need to build an understanding in your head, thanks to a lot of contacts with different cultures, different people, but also advisors of what is going on in the world and how things could evolve, because it plays a very big role. And you also have many different interests that people have in the world. So there's no universal recipe on how to do it. I think it's always a question of balancing things out and thinking about the longer term future of the company.
Many of my earlier interviewees who are CEOs say they have been kept long hours at night in the past few years, just trying to figure out what are they going to do. But what about for you at this moment? What is on top of your mind, the priorities?
So maybe our business model is a bit different. We're used to think about risk all the time. I think most people prefer to think about opportunities, but for us, the opportunity is the risk. So we think about risks all the time. We're surrounded with risk modelers everywhere. So every risk where we have a sense of how to price it, how to calculate it, we feel more comfortable about. But on top of mind is clearly the geopolitical situation for us at this stage. This is an extremely dangerous moment for humanity. That's how we feel about it. And we all need to work together to solve this.
It's not a slogan.
It's not a slogan. It's extremely worrying and necessary. And I hope that this opening up now, the post-COVID period, gives us the opportunity to communicate with each other and also transmit the seriousness of what we're seeing. There's always, humanity always has a choice. There's always also a positive path. I don't believe in fixed path, but we have to make an effort to take the positive path.
Earlier we see the Chinese president made a trip to Moscow and be able to interact with his Russian counterpart, also touched on a peace plan China proposed. Of course, the plan is very much proposal of principles. And the other side certainly took note of that, to say the least. How much efforts do you see all the relevant players need to put into this so that a kind of opportunity could arise for achieving possible peace? If you got an opportunity to speak to the leaders of the world, like political leaders, as a business leader, what would you say to them?
I think in all of this war situation, the emotions run very high, of course, in Europe, in the US, and which is why I think China has the biggest opportunity to be helpful. Of course, this is not your war, but you are more on the side, and you're very powerful, and Russia might listen to you. So, of course, the best possible scenario is if there was a support. And we, of course, observe very well how China has struck a peace deal or helped struck a peace deal in other places in the world, which is a bit of a signal and an inspiration. And so, of course, this would be something extremely welcomed by the European community, as you can imagine, if we could get some support there.
Now, China is on its path for economic recovery. Of course, during the pandemic years, every economy suffers. China is no exception. How do you see the opportunities and the challenges in this market at this moment?
Some of the priorities are around the aging society. So the question around long-term care products, insurance products, how can we design some new products that are needed by the elderly? The second area is, of course, with climate change and natural catastrophes, flooding, to provide risk insights, risk knowledge, so that we can insure some of this risk. And the third one is what I just mentioned, the rural development is a big priority for China. And there are also very good opportunities for us to participate.
Thank you so much, Christian.
Thank you.